Good morning, everybody. Welcome in to the Week 10 edition. We have reached double digits of the Establish the Run First Look show. I am your host, Gary Hartman, welcoming you in to this 10-game main slate. We're going to take a first look at this 10-game slate. We have buys this week. We have a Germany game this week, and that leaves us back with 10 games. Crazy, as always, that we are now over the halfway point of the NFL season, but we shall march right along. If you haven't joined us before, the purpose of this show is to take a look at the upcoming DraftKings main slate from a 10,000-foot perspective, quick, rapid-fire style, just to start getting our heads in the correct headspace of what we should be looking at, what kind of plays stand out to us, what kind of construction potentially, etc. So we shall dive right in. Usually we will go position by position, and we will do that. I like to go quickly over the kind of look of the slate first. And once again, I mentioned 10 games, 10 teams on bye this week: Chiefs, Rams, Dolphins, Eagles. 4 huge fantasy offenses, right? Chiefs, Dolphins, Eagles, obviously huge. The Rams have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. That's a big one. So some firepower off the slate just from a buy perspective. Then if you look at the primetime games, everyone is really excited for 2 nights for now for the barn burner that will be the Panthers and Bears. So those 2 are off the main slate. Germany Sunday morning is Colts, Patriots. A little bit of fantasy relevance there, particularly on the Colts side. Sunday night, we get Jets back-to-back primetime games. They are in Vegas to visit Antonio Pierce's Raiders. So Jets, Raiders Sunday night. And then Monday night, Broncos, Bills. So not only do we have the Chiefs, Dolphins, Eagles off the slate, we also have the Bills. That's a ton of major fantasy offenses. However, there's still plenty of very interesting high ceiling plays on the slate. But once again, which seems like more weeks than not, this season, we have no games with 50-point total. 48.5 is our highest this week, and that is the Lions Chargers. Certainly a game that I'd be excited to attack there at 4:05 in LA. And then 46.5 Houston Cincinnati is our next highest. 45.5 Commanders Seahawks, and then 44.5 49ers Jaguars. Everything else is rather low, in the low 40s or high 30s, or I think in the Giants Cowboys case, like mid 30s. So that's kind of the lay of the land. And then from a team total perspective, Dallas, mentioned that game, they have the highest team total. So 27.75. I think the Giants are projected to score like 11 points. So the Cowboys have the highest team total on the slate at 27.75. The Bengals implied for 26.75. Seattle, 25.75. The Lions, 25. 49ers, 23.75. Chargers, 23.5. And after that, you kind of dive down into the low 20s and high teens. So still some very interesting spots and some interesting offenses. Not as ugly on the surface as last week's slate was, per se, but certainly nothing that jumps off the page at you. Maybe the Lions Chargers game does a bit. Okay, let's dive right in at quarterback here, starting up top with Lamar Jackson, who, disappointing week for sure, especially if you're thinking, okay, the Ravens are going to win 37-3. And usually my thought is on these types of games, when that kind of blowout happens, the quarterback usually does have a higher floor. However, that was not the case for the Ravens this week. Gus Edwards punches it in. What was it, 2 times or 3 times again? And Lamar had a fumble lost, still did get 187 through the air and 60 touchdowns, but didn't find the box. And, that's going to happen every now and then with that type of performance. So now we have 2 down weeks for Lamar. One was disappointing because of the opponent in Arizona. One was disappointing because of the environment and kind of the opponent in Seattle. Down weeks from a fantasy perspective, I should say. But the Ravens just keep chugging along and winning. They don't really care that Lamar is not putting up fantasy points. This week now, you have an in-division game against perhaps the best defense in the league in Cleveland, and he's the most expensive quarterback on the slate. Usually, guys like Lamar Jackson, I don't completely leave out of my player pool, or I would want at least some exposure to them. And I feel the same way this week. I wouldn't fully fade Lamar Jackson as an option. However, I do think that this is a spot where we want to save some money, perhaps. It's a tough matchup. We are kind of trending the wrong way with Lamar right now and his points. He did put up, it's worth noting, 29.14 against Cleveland in week 4. So now you go home, back to back. I think there's certainly that 30-point plus ceiling there for you on Lamar. It's kind of your decision how you want to handle that. Still a tough matchup, no doubt. Ravens playing great ball, though. All right, Justin Herbert last night, disappointing. But they, again, similar situation. They don't care. The Chargers won the game pretty handily in New York or New Jersey. And we expected Herbert to perhaps struggle in this one because the Jets have an excellent pass defense. Now, this game environment, and the Lions have a good defense too. Let's not kid ourselves. But now this game environment is quite attractive here. I mentioned the highest over-under on the slate, 48.5. He's 7,700, so I think they raised his price a little bit here. But we've seen it from Herbert this year. He had a 32.3. Now, still, I mentioned this a bunch of times. He had not one 30-point DraftKings game all of last season, and now halfway through the season, he only has one. So in the last season and a half, we only had one 30-point DraftKings game. So you could certainly make the argument that you want to play the other side of this game with Jared Goff and save that money. So Goff is 6,400 compared to Herbert's 77. So you're saving 1,300. The Chargers did a good job in pass defense yesterday, but that was against Zach Wilson and a horrendous Jets offensive line. The Lions have a great offensive line and are going to be able to throw the ball in this Chargers team. I feel confident about that. And usually I like to attack Goff at home, right, in the dome. I do think on a slate with this, with no Mahomes, no Josh Allen, no Jalen Hurts, no Tua, I think a road Goff in the best game environment of the week is intriguing. So I would be interested in that. You know they're going to throw the ball a lot. Coming off the bye, yeah, I think this is a very interesting spot for Jared Goff. So I do like him if you want to save the money from Herbert, if you want to attack that game. What simulation are we living in that it's week 10 of the NFL season and CJ Stroud in the same game, mind you, is now $100 more than Joe Burrow. But that is how good CJ Stroud has been. And I mentioned last week, I went back and looked at what I said about Stroud because I wanted to see if I had put him in the ether at all. And I'd said it, I thought he was definitely an option. I wasn't super excited about it, but I liked the home matchup with Tampa Bay. And then he puts up just all these rookie records, 470 touchdowns, 470 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 45 DraftKings points. Those are the kind of numbers that as tournament players we salivate over. I only played a couple lineups last week due to some personal stuff, and I had him in like 3 of my 5. So obviously those ones did pretty well. But now they bump him all the way up to above Joe Burrow. I like Stroud. You know, I do like Stroud a lot. I'll consider him because, again, there is a smaller slate. But I don't know in what world I can, on the road, coming off, you know, when the field probably wants to click on CJ Stroud after that week, I don't know how I could possibly play him over $100 cheaper, Joe Burrow, in the same matchup. So, again, we're still waiting on a huge game from Burrow this year, but there's absolutely no doubt that over the last 4 weeks, he looks like himself again. Great win over the Bills on Sunday night, threw for 350, 2 touchdowns, 25 DraftKings points. We just saw this Houston team give up huge plays through the air to Tampa Bay, and they got themselves in a back and forth environment. Stroud has shown that he can kind of keep up in those types of paces. The Texans can score. I think we are all more impressed with their offense than our priors were in preseason as far as like the talent of the receiver core, et cetera. So I definitely like this game, and I definitely want to attack the Burrow side. I'm sure the Burrow side will be more popular. And another big caveat here is Jamar Chase going to play? And we'll talk about that in a second. However, wouldn't fault you for going to either of those players, but hard for me to recommend CJ Stroud now that he's $100 more, despite him coming off that historic week. All right, Dak, I just mentioned how when a team's projected to win by like 17 and they have a 28 or more team total, I do like to play the quarterbacks. Now, it wasn't that situation with Baltimore last week. They just did happen to blow them out. But usually, we saw this like in week 8. They beat the Rams 43-20, right? This game's in Dallas. They're coming off a pretty tough loss, and you could have argued they had a good chance at. Dak's playing the best of the season so far, these last 3 games. And now you get a team with the Giants now who are just lost in the wind and should be in full tank mode, probably get your shine box, Tommy DeVito, once again. So I think I like Dak quite a bit here at 6,700. And I don't know if the field's going to attack it that much because I don't think people think the Giants can push it all. But again, if they're going to win 40-10 or something like that, probably 48-3, a lot of that's going to happen through the air. So I do like Dak a lot here at home at 6,700. I think that's an interesting play. Going down from there, you got Trevor Lawrence. I'm a little worried about this spot because we haven't seen it. The Jaguars are good, but we have not seen a ceiling from Trevor Lawrence. What's working in his favor is he's finally coming off a bye that they needed for a long time with those back-to-back London games, and they're at home. But the Niners are also coming off a bye and are coming off back-to-back losses. Like this just seems like a little bit of a trappy spot for me for Jacksonville against a Niners defense that's rested and we can still consider very good. Trevor Lawrence's highest total this entire season on DraftKings is 20.7, but now his price reflects that at 6K. I wouldn't fully fade him in a 150 set, but it's not my top choice. Kyler Murray is expected to start, and we get a home matchup with the Falcons. Not necessarily ideal, but listen, if you ever heard you were getting Kyler Murray at sub 6K, I think you can go to it. It's ugly. Cardinals stink. We have no idea what kind of shape he's going to be in. If you want to say I'd rather take a wait and see approach on Kyler, I'd understand, but I do think this isn't a bad slate to take that swing while you get the discount. Sam Howell, also like him quite a bit. This is a guy that just has a really nice floor, a nice ceiling with the low floor, which is fine, but we want the ceiling, right? We've seen 35s out of him. We've seen 30s out of him. A good place. And even in a tough matchup going into New England, he puts up 21.7 with over 300 passing yards. I think he's pretty good. This in Seattle, this game has a little bit sneaky, will be a little bit sneaky as well. I mentioned third highest game total at 45.5. Commanders usually can push, and they're going to get themselves in these shootout environments. And then Seattle, on the other side, has the third highest team total on the week. So if you just jump down to Geno here, not been the Geno Smith season we were hoping for, coming off of last year's comeback player of the year run and just how strong he's been. However, this is a great matchup. It's a great get right spot. They traded away Sweat and Chase Young. Their defense hasn't been able to do anything anyway. Seattle's at home. He's 5,800. I'd be willing to take one more shot here. If it doesn't get done for Geno this week, maybe I'm willing to change my stance about his ceiling in 2023. But I do think that this is a spot you can definitely take some shots on Geno. So I think I like that tier of Geno and above the most. Purdy, you can definitely make an argument for in that Jacksonville game as well at 5,700. Really hard for me to get into Jordan Love. Dobbs, they bring up to 55. Dobbs has been really good. Give him another week for the rocket scientists to the Pastronaut, I believe they're calling them, to learn the playbook. And they're at home against the Saints. Saints have a pretty good D, but I don't mind that if you want to play that way in tournaments. Watson on the road against Baltimore, even at this dirt cheap price, no thank you. And then Will Levis will be the next guy that I would take some shots on. He's obviously willing to throw the ball really deep. He's very cheap, and this is a Bucs team that just got obliterated by CJ Stroud. Now, Will Levis, I do not think is CJ Stroud, but we are still getting to know Will Levis a little bit, and we know he's willing to throw the ball. So I do like Levis here at 53. I think that just about does it for my interest at quarterbacks. Let's go over to running back. And we're coming off a week where we did not have Christian McCaffrey or Austin Eckler on the main slate, and now they're both back here, which definitely makes things interesting. CMC will look to continue his obscene touchdown streak coming off the bye in Jacksonville. I don't have any holes to poke in a Christian McCaffrey case. If you want to play Christian McCaffrey, there's a very good chance you're getting 25 to 30 points just by him being out on the field. Now at 9,200, you probably want to be getting 35-ish. But again, running back is definitely that position. You need to get it right. Chalk is easier to eat at running back. I don't know what kind of ownership he'll come with this week. I don't know how easy it'll be to necessarily fit in CMC into your lineups, but I like him quite a bit. However, if you want a player with a similar ceiling, just jump down $800 to Austin Eckler, who's in our best game environment of the week. Detroit does have a good run defense, but the great thing about Eckler, he gets a lot of his damage done through the air. Cody Main and I on the Showdown show yesterday were talking about, hey, we really think Eckler's got a nice floor through the air this game against the Jets. They've given up a ton of passing work to running backs, and yet he only has 2 receptions on 7 targets. However, found the box twice, was able to get over 20 points. Eckler is going to be a priority for me in many weeks down the stretch here, I think. Kamara was definitely disappointing in week 9. He was the cover boy last week, got a Chicago team that had been gashed. One thing that's definitely going to impact Kamara's ceiling is Taysom Hill. I mean, just the amount that they're using him in the goal line. Overall, you probably need these massive chuck down Carly games from Derek Carr to be throwing just, those 10 plus balls to Alvin Kamara. So I don't dislike him here in Minnesota at 83, and I think he could fall through the cracks a little bit compared to his guys above him. But because he's priced in that same tier, makes it a little bit tough. Didn't mean to say. I probably could skip Saquon because honestly, the role is going to be amazing. He's going to touch the ball 20 plus times a game, no matter what, pretty much. But it's very hard to invest in Saquon Barkley on a Tommy DeVito led Giants team heading into Dallas. I guess he'd make my MME player pool, but I don't think I want to play any Giants this week. Derrick Henry gets the Bucks. That's a toughish matchup in Tampa Bay. I think we can throw the ball easier against them. And he's shown a floor, especially since Levis has been in, but I don't know what kind of ceiling we have there right now. This is warm weather. I like cold weather Derrick Henry. It's fine. I don't have a huge say one way or the other. Listen, if there's ever a Tony Pollard get right spot, also, it's this one I mentioned. They have the highest team total on the week. His last game against the Giants was week 1. He put up his lone 20-point DraftKings game of the season. There's no doubt it's been incredibly disappointing for Tony Pollard. 7,300 I like the get back spot for Pollard. Etienne's a guy at this point that is in consideration for like fantasy MVP from the running back perspective. 4 straight games of over 20 to almost 40 points here. And, even in some of those in tough matchups, New Orleans, in Pittsburgh, in Buffalo. So this game at home against San Francisco, I would not be ruling out Etienne. And I still think he's actually underpriced here. They haven't really moved his tag despite these massive weeks. Add something through the air. He's had at least 3 or 4 catches in 6 straight games. And, 7,100 is probably underpriced for Etienne. So I do like him. Gibbs, let's wait and see what's going to happen with the Lions running backs here, but he's no doubt been excellent as the bell cow. 2 straight weeks before the bye of massive ceilings. Montgomery says, okay, trending towards a return as of yesterday night. So, that definitely shakes things up a little bit. I'd be interested in playing some D-Mont against the Chargers defense that historically we've been able to run on a bit. Kenneth Walker's role is starting to reduce a little bit. I knew last week was never the week for Walker again in Baltimore. I definitely think you could see a get right spot for Kenneth Walker in the Seattle run game in this spot. Aaron Jones finally was used in a way that we can get behind. 24 total touches here. Carried the ball 20 times in the ugly win against the Rams. The problem is now you're going into Pittsburgh. It was not the easiest matchup, but man, this offense is just struggling so much. Jordan Love really does not look like he has it, and I think they're going to need these dump downs to Aaron Jones. So at 6,500, I don't mind it. Matchup beside, I think that's okay. Also, things trending in the right direction for Joe Mixon. Starting to look good. Wasn't able to get it done on the ground against Buffalo, but did find the end zone, meaning from an efficiency standpoint, 2.6 yards per carry. Did find the end zone, 5 catches, 31 yards. Like the role, like the price, like the offense, like the game environment. No holes to poke there. Gus Edwards, tough matchup against the Browns, but no. So 6 total touchdowns over the last 3 weeks for Gus Edwards. Certainly somebody you can trust from a role perspective. Bijan is still 6K, and it's frustrating. It's so frustrating. Like, what is going on here? Use your best player, Arthur Smith, please. I know I'm not the first or last person to say this. Look at this. This guy's efficient. We know he's an excellent player. He's 6K. Like, I'm going to keep taking shots there just in hopes that they finally get it right. But my God. Rachaad White coming off a big week. This is not the week I like to go back to it against a Tennessee defense that has been always good at stopping the run. Madison now becomes really interesting again with Cam Akers out. Josh Dobbs, found him through the air a little bit this past week. I don't mind taking shots on Madison at 55. Jerome Ford would still be my preferred. Browns back to carry the ball 20 times, but this is a tough matchup against Baltimore. And then, the Pittsburgh guys are cheap and I think are very interesting tournament plays in a matchup with Green Bay that does not scare you this year. All right, let's go to receivers. Justin Jefferson might come off the IR this week. If he does, of course, he'll be in tournament consideration. Don't think he'll be a cash option yet. We kind of want to see how he looks, what he looks like with Josh Dobbs, etc. But that's going to be an option for you. Keenan Allen, once again, grinded his way to an 8 for 77 line. I've talked at length about how his ceiling is significantly lower when him and Austin Eckler share the field together. But we have no Mike Williams. We have no Josh Palmer. This is the best game environment of the week. I do not mind taking shots on Keenan Allen. If Jamar Chase plays, I'm interested. If he sits, I think that T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd will be great plays, even at chalk. We'll talk about those guys in a little bit. CeeDee Lamb is back-to-back monster weeks. He did not get that much done against the Giants in week 1, but they won 40-0 in that game. Could have a very similar outcome this week. So, hey, I think that he is a very good play for sure at 8,500, but he's expensive. He's right up to that main tier, but we know there's a massive ceiling there. Amon-Ra was my cover boy of the week this week, coming off the bye. He's the model of consistency in fantasy sports, and I talked about how we've loved throwing on this Chargers team. The Jets weren't able to get it done last night, but again, that's Zach Wilson, a bad offensive line, and Garrett Wilson still had, a decent box score here. Amon-Ra in LA, this looks like a smash spot to me at 8,300. I love me some Sun God this week. Then you take a big jump down in price to the 7K tier. Mike Evans, still someone that I'm interested in at that tier for sure. I think there's a ceiling there. Ayuk also at 7,100 is pretty good in that game environment if you want to attack the Niner side of things. Metcalf only had 1 catch, but it was for 50 yards. We're still waiting on a big Metcalf game. I definitely think it could be this week against a Washington team. So I'm interested in Metcalf. I'm interested in Lockett. Maybe even JSN makes my player pool. Godwin, I just don't trust the ceiling right now that much with Baker. I know if you look at target share and air yard split and everything like that, the role between Godwin and Evans is not that different. We just know Evans has the bigger playability and hence the higher ceiling. It also seems like he's more of a favorite target of Baker. Nico Collins, they finally priced up to an appropriate price at 66. So that makes me a little bit less interested. Although if I'm attacking that game, I'd certainly boost him up with correlation. However, I'm probably more interested to take Dell, who's still underpriced at 5,500 here. They only pumped him up 200 coming off the 30-point week. Really like Tank Dell as a tournament player. Just a good player overall. T. Higgins finally had a 100-yard game as well. And again, could be in for a huge wide receiver one role depending on the status of Jamar Chase. Olave also just felt like it could have had a much bigger game. 6 for 46 and a touchdown. Again, somebody else that's probably being impacted negatively by Taysom Hill's goal line work, etc. But, this is a pretty good matchup against Minnesota, and he's still very cheap. I like taking shots on Olave. I'm not as interested in Amari Cooper, despite, him being optimal once again here with 28 points. But, in Baltimore, just to me. We'll wait and see on the Debo front. Lockett already talked about. Kirk. I like attacking these Jags guys. The Niners have been beatable through the air for sure. So I do like Christian Kirk. I like Calvin Ridley. I think they're both very interesting this week. Ridley's super cheap at 5,600. He's going to continue to be a great tournament play to me. He had 10 targets in that game before the bye. I like him. Hopkins certainly has been a little bit rejuvenated, I think, with Will Levis. So in that first game, obviously, with Levis, he had the huge 3-touchdown performance. Second game, 11 targets. I do like Hopkins at 6K. Addison, they bring him back down to 5,900, but if Jefferson's back, plus the offense running under Dobbs, I don't know. He'll make your tournament pool. I think that's about it. Zay Flowers was chalk last week, busted in a big way. And he's starting to get into that range of guys that, to me, are a cash game play, but not so much tournament option. I just don't know what the ceiling is there, and I think there's a floor. So I think that's just something to consider there. We'll see. Drake London missed last week. If he's back, he'd be in play against Arizona. Deontay Johnson against the Packers, certainly going to be an option for you as well. And, again, no one ever gets excited about playing Deontay Johnson, but the guy just earns targets left and right, finally found the end zone after a year and a half. So that's good for him. And then everyone else down here, Dotson right at that 5K, cheap wide receiver volume mark. We'll talk about all those guys behind the paywall on cheap wide receiver volume. We have no Travis Kelce on the slate, no Dallas Goedert, who got hurt. So some interesting options still for you at tight end. No Cole Kmet, who went off once again last week. We got Mark Andrews up top against Cleveland. In the same matchup, he did have 25 points in week 4. So let's not ignore that. Again, this is at home. He's been really consistent throughout this Ravens run, like double-digit points in every game except one. You'll take that out of a tight end, even at 6,900. He also is one of the few guys that has a 30-point ceiling. So I don't mind the Mark Andrews of it all. George Kittle, a lot of it for me is dependent on Debo's availability. He obviously sees an uptick in role when one of those three guys is out. We've had 11 targets and 7 targets in the last 2 games before the bye. I do like Kittle at 61, and he's always going to be a good tournament player because he's such a boom bust guy. You'll take that boom side of it. Laporta as well. It's just been, man, this guy's got the goods, right? Like, he's just a great player. Now he's in the best game environment of the week, 5,700. Don't mind that. Conklin had some big stuff against the Chargers last night. The Chargers have struggled against tight ends for sure. Laporta's really good. Like a Goff, Amon-Ra, Laporta double stack. Like, I don't know what kind of ownership it'll have. I'm sure it'll be somewhat popular, but it's hard for me to not like that kind of setup this week. They bring Taysom Hill all the way up to the fourth highest tight end, and I kind of get it. He's going to get goal line rush work. He's going to get a little bit of passing work. He's receiving the ball still, lining up as a legitimate tight end. So I kind of understand it. 11 carries, and he's going to get the goal. I think he should be in your player pool for sure. Hawkinson's too cheap at 5K. Might not play, but still earned a lot of targets from Josh Dobbs. So I do think he's too cheap there. Dalton Schultz has been on a tear, 31 points. Who knew that you needed a triple Houston stack with Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz, and Tank Dell in week 9, but that is what you needed. Now you got a game against the Bengals that I do like quite a bit. Dalton Kincaid was able to really take a lot of stuff underneath and just work up some volume in that same matchup. And, they're ranked 32nd on the DraftKings metrics against tight ends, only 4,900. That looks pretty good to me. Also, Ferguson against the Giants, I like quite a bit here. Another 10 targets, 91 yards, and a touchdown. It was a good tight end week in week 9, actually. A lot of interesting good tight end scores. Ingram, probably slightly underpriced at 4,500 if you want to attack the Jaguars game. Kyle Pitts, man. We thought it was a Kyle Pitts week, right? No Drake London game against Minnesota. You can make the same argument this week in Arizona, but London might be back. Who knows if Heineke actually likes him? It was actually Jonnu Smith, who's been a big part of the offense throughout, that got it done. Jonnu Smith, 5 for 100 and a touchdown. So both those guys probably make my player pool. And Njoku found the end zone now for 2 straight weeks after he was due for some positive regression there. Don't love the matchup here in Baltimore. Gerald Everett, 2 for 18. I don't think I'm interested there with Parham, and them splitting work. You could probably get Logan Thomas still in your player pool. He's been very consistent role. Luke Musgrave can probably still make your player pool. So a lot of options at all different sides. Trey McBride, they do bring up to that 3K tier. I guess they brought up to 37 last week, back to 35 now. Parham 32. Juwan Johnson finally found the end zone. I don't know if I'm going there. I think it's a little cute down here, but hey, you can always take punts at this position. Okay, 25 minutes, right on the nose. I know I go fast. I know we go quick. Hopefully it gets you start getting the wheels churning, start thinking about what we like this week. I think it's an interesting slate at first glance. We'll have you covered and all throughout the week, team by team pods later today, Adam Solo pod, and then of course matchups, all that good stuff coming later in the week. Check out everything we have going on at establishthorun.com. Check out the subscribe page for the discounted rest of season packages. And of course, can't recommend enough checking out the NBA product and everything we're doing over there. We are just dominating the prop streets. So that's a lot of fun. We went 9-0 again last night. Definitely recommend checking out what we're doing over there. And then, of course, the DFS side as well. Well-deserved day off from NBA today. Go out and vote as it is election day. And I wish you all the best of luck here in week 10. We will be back with you next week. Good luck, everyone. Take care.